really is so little we know about space. It's as intriguing as it is unsettling. But the more astronomers study the stars, the closer they get to reaching answers, and the more and more questions crop up like a game of whack-a-mole. Today we're discussing some of the coolest and creepiest anomalies spotted out in space by astronomers. Let's get right into it. And we're starting off the list with something pretty exciting. Possible alien megastructures on Tabby's star. So Tabby's star, scientifically known as KIC 8462852, which I think is a much catchier title. Tabby's star, just a bit of a mouthful. But it's become pretty popular in recent years. Astronomers have spotted unusual and irregular dimming patterns on the star. The star's brightness dims unpredictably, and at times way more than what's expected for your typical star. So because of the strangeness that seems to be going on with this star, it's led some to speculate that there could be alien megastructures on it. And yes, even scientists are saying it's a possibility. I know it sounds wild, but the idea is that advanced extraterrestrial civilizations might be constructing massive structures like Dyson spheres or swarms around the star. And the purpose of these hypothetical megastructures could be to intentionally block or harvest the star's light to be used as energy. This would cause the dimming effect that we see. Now, this is just one speculative hypothesis. There are others, but it's pretty cool to think that this may be a genuine sign of life out there in space. Next, let's talk about fast radio bursts. So fast radio bursts, or FRBs, are powerful, fleeting signals from deep space that last just a fraction of a second, up to 3 seconds at the most. Scientists use radio telescopes to detect these bursts, but they're still not exactly sure what causes them. One theory is that FRBs could be born from cataclysmic events like collisions between neutron stars and black holes, creating ripples in space-time that generate these intense signals. And there is also the possibility that they come from advanced extraterrestrial civilizations. What makes FRBs so strange, though, is the amount of energy that they send out. In just a millisecond, these bursts release as much energy as our sun emits in 3 entire days. And what's frustrating, though, is that they appear so sporadically, it's really tough to sit down and study them. So while there are possibilities as to what could be causing these signals, they're still pretty much a complete mystery. The Great Attractor. Now that sounds like some cosmic horror right there, and it kinda is. The Great Attractor is a massive gravitational area of the universe that's pulling our Milky Way galaxy and numerous other galaxies toward it. And yeah, that's kind of scary. The Great Attractor was first identified in the 70s when scientists noticed that our Milky Way, along with other galaxies around us, weren't moving in the direction that gravitational forces alone could explain. Something massive and hidden seemed to be tugging at everything. Now, we can't directly see the Great Attractor, so astronomers have to rely on indirect observations and measurements to understand its existence. It's this unseen force of nature, very Lovecrafty. It's thought to be a concentration of both visible and dark matter, which is the invisible substance that makes up a large part of the universe. More on that later. So what happens though when we eventually get pulled into whatever this thing is? Luckily we'll be long dead, so no point really worrying about it. But a great cosmic force like this, it really does remind us how small and insignificant we are in the grand scheme of things. Next up we have space orcs. Yes, astronomers have spotted orcs in space. Orc standing for odd radio circles. Not quite as exciting as spotting green goblin monsters in space, but also less alarming. Like, would we really be able to lay our heads down at night and sleep comfortably knowing there were orcs? I don't think so. So odd radio circles. These circles are strange astronomical objects, and scientists aren't entirely sure what causes them. Scientists have spotted them by scanning the sky using radio telescopes. They're basically circular formations and don't match any known astronomical objects or phenomena. They're not galaxies, they're not stars or supernova, they're a total mystery, and because of this, they have the nickname WTF. Now, some scientists think they could be shock waves from cosmic events, like an explosion or a collision that creates ripples that we detect as circles, but they could also come from unknown objects or phenomena we just haven't discovered yet, which is pretty cool. We got a very large space rock coming our way, a mega comet. Now, luckily, it's going to pass us by about 1 billion miles and won't be coming until 2031, but this thing really is massive. This thing, which was first spotted in 2021, is the biggest ever observed comet. It's 100,000 times the mass of your average comet. The comet is so big that at first astronomers categorized it as a minor planet. What's freaky about this is that there's almost definitely much larger comets whizzing around out there, and although this one luckily isn't going to make contact with us, there could be another one hurtling our way as we speak. That just hasn't been spotted yet.
All the way up until the 20th century, more specifically 1846, the small island of Remaja, located just off the north coast of the Yucatan, was present on almost all maps. And then one day, all of a sudden it disappeared, as though it had never even existed in the first place. Interest in the island peaked in 2008 after it was pointed out that the island, if it's real, would have no real boundaries or oil rights in the Gulf of Mexico. This prompted a large number of search parties to go out and look for the island, but ultimately each and every one of them were unsuccessful, and to this day the mysterious island has never been found. Some people believe that the island either fell to the sea or perhaps never existed at all, but you and I, we know better, and I think just maybe the island did exist, and it still does, only it somehow got bumped to an alternate reality. I mean, it's possible. Anything's possible.
The case of the missing Canadian Pacific Airlines flight of 1951 is one of the most mysterious missing plane cases in history. On July 21st of 1951, the DC-4 aircraft, flying from Vancouver to Tokyo with a stopover in Anchorage, Alaska, seemed to vanish into thin air. Everything seemed routine as Flight 3505 took off from Vancouver. The passengers settled in for their long journey. At about 90 minutes from Anchorage, the flight reported in at the Cape Spencer intersection in British Columbia with an estimated time of arrival in Alaska at midnight. The weather wasn't ideal though. Heavy rain, icing conditions, and visibility of just 500 feet made for a rather treacherous journey, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary until the radio went silent. As the clock struck midnight and there was no sign of the plane, an emergency warning was issued. The United States Air Force and Royal Canadian Air Force launched a search operation, and for weeks they hunted for the plane and any signs of its 37 occupants. But it was as if it had just vanished into thin air. The search continued until October 31st of 1951 before it was finally called off. No wreckage, no bodies, no clues.
Oftentimes, I lay awake at night and let my mind wander. Strangely enough, more than a few times that wandering has led me to questioning just why the heck we haven't found Cleopatra's tomb. I mean, according to some archaeologists and historians, we're close, but we've been close for years, and still, no cigar. It doesn't make any sense, because according to ancient Egyptian texts, Cleopatra was to be buried alongside her lover, Mark Antony. Furthermore, she was to be buried in a splendid and regal fashion, so why hasn't her final resting place been found? Surely, as one of the most prominent members of Egyptian society, she would have been buried in one of the Great Pyramids, no? So either we're missing a pyramid because we haven't found it yet, or because it no longer exists in this reality, because the gravesite of Cleopatra really doesn't seem like something the ancient Egyptians would have wanted anyone to miss, and it's quite literally written into their ancient texts that she was buried in Alexandria, and said burial was incredibly grand. There is, of course, another theory, and that that is that Cleopatra's tomb and the other missing tombs have, since their creation, sunk to the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea due to a devastating tsunami that washed over Egypt back in 365 AD. Which one do you think it is?
The Witchcraft, one of the many ships swallowed up by the Bermuda Triangle. On December 22nd of 1967, the Witchcraft, a 23-foot luxury cabin cruiser, vanished without a trace off the coast of Miami. The ship was owned and captained by Dan Burak and was known for its state-of-the-art features. It had a high-tech radio and was apparently built to be unsinkable, but we all know what happens to ships that claim to be unsinkable, don't we? On the evening of its disappearance, Burak and his friend Father Patrick Horgan set out for what was going to be a short cruise along the Miami coastline. Around 9 p.m., Burak radioed the United States Coast Guard to report that the Witchcraft had hit something and was starting to take on water. The Coast Guard immediately dispatched a search and rescue operation, and they arrived really soon. It was just 15 minutes after having received the distress call. But the boat was gone. Not even a small sign of wreckage. The search for the missing vessel continued for several days, but it was never found.
In May of 1957, two sisters, Joanna and Jacqueline, died after being hit by a reckless driver. It was later discovered that the driver, who had been under the influence, had actually killed them purposefully after having her own daughters taken away from her by force. But that's not really the point of the story. The point is that Joanna and Jacqueline's parents were heartbroken, and they wanted to do whatever they could to bring their daughters back. And somehow, on October 4th of 1958, it seems as though they did. Mrs. Pollock gave birth to twin sisters, Jennifer and Jillian, who shared eerily similar traits to both Joanna and Jacqueline. In fact, as they aged, Jennifer even developed a birthmark that looked exactly like the one Jacqueline had on her left hip. And on her forehead, she had a birthmark that matched a small scar Jacqueline had in the exact same location. Furthermore, although the twins grew up in an entirely different town than Joanna and Jacqueline, they both recalled living in Hexham, where the original Pollock sisters had grown up. They could describe in great detail places they had never been before, but that Joanna and Jacqueline had. I'm not sure whether or not this proves alternate realities, but it seems as though something in the universe was not going to stand for a reality in which Joanna and Jacqueline truly ceased to exist.
Speaking of terrifying things hurtling towards us, let's talk about Andromeda. So Andromeda, the largest and nearest galaxy to our Milky Way, just happens to be on a collision course for it. One day it will collide with the Milky Way. And when the Milky Way and the Andromeda galaxies finally collide, it won't be a sudden smash. The process takes a very long time because of the vast distances between the stars, and stars are so far apart anyway that it's unlikely they'll collide individually. But the night sky will change, constellations will shift, the appearance of the night sky will be very different in the distant future. But this collision won't be happening until billions of years from now, so there's no need to really worry about it affecting life on Earth or even distant descendants of humanity. Fingers crossed we'll have gotten our act together and we'll be like far off on other planets by the time this happens. Next, let's talk about supernovas. Supernovas are incredibly powerful explosions that occur when massive stars reach the end of their lives. Now, the good news is that the nearest star capable of going supernova is still quite a distance away from us. We're talking many light years, but what if a supernova was so powerful that even if it was super far away, it could still affect us? What damage could it cause? Well, it could potentially affect Earth's atmosphere. The explosion releases an enormous amount of energy, including intense radiation, and this radiation, in theory, could interact with Earth's atmosphere, leading to the breakdown of the ozone layer. The ozone layer is crucial for life on Earth because it absorbs the majority of the sun's harmful UV radiation. So, in this situation, we'd be in pretty big trouble. We'd basically burn up like in Terminator 2. Next up, we have the mystery as to what dark matter and dark energy consists of. Now, we know there's a lot of stuff in a galaxy, stars, planets, and gas, but when scientists calculate all the visible matter, it's not enough. The galaxies are spinning faster than they should be based on what we can see. Something extra is needed to explain this, and that something is called dark matter. Dark matter doesn't emit, absorb, or reflect light, which is why we can't directly see it. unexplained. It's the invisible scaffolding that's holding the visible parts of the galaxy together. But the invisible part, dark matter and dark energy, makes up 95% of the known universe, and that's a lot of mystery, energy, and matter. What we see, not just on a day-to-day basis here on Earth, but also when we look up at the billions of stars in the sky, that's still just barely even a sliver of reality. The universe is also constantly expanding. We know it's expanding because galaxies are slowly moving away from each other, but over time this expansion continues to speed up. Something is pushing the galaxies apart faster and faster. Scientists refer to this unseen energy as dark energy. Basically, dark matter is the invisible glue holding galaxies together, and dark energy is the mysterious repellent force making the universe expand. And we don't know what it is. Next on the list, we have the Tunguska event. This was a powerful explosion that occurred on June 30th of 1908 near the Tunguska River in Siberia, Russia. It's known as one of the most mysterious events in modern history. So there was a large impact or explosion that flattened about 80 million trees over an area of about 830 square miles. The shock wave from the blast was felt thousands of kilometers away. Strangely though, there was no impact crater found at the site. This led scientists to conclude that whatever caused the event must have disintegrated in the Earth's atmosphere before reaching the ground. What most scientists think is that this was caused by the airburst of a large meteoroid or comet. The energy released by the explosion was estimated to be equivalent to 10 to 15 megatons of TNT, making it about 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Luckily, this happened in a very remote area, so only trees were affected, but that also means there weren't many witnesses. But a handful of people did report seeing a bright bluish light in the sky, accompanied by a series of thunderous noises. But of course, there's always been this question as to whether this was caused by a space rock or something else. And finally, I couldn't make this list without discussing the WOW signal. The WOW was a strange radio signal detected by astronomer Jerry Amon in 1977 while he was studying radio waves from space. Because he couldn't make out what the hell the signal was, he just wrote WOW on the printout of the signal, thus it got that name. It was a unique and very strong radio frequency that lasted about 72 seconds and came from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius. The signal was at a frequency of 1420 megahertz, a frequency that's usually associated with hydrogen, the most abundant element in the universe. What's strange is that the signal was never detected again though. Scientists naturally figured if it was a natural phenomenon, it would repeat, but from what we know, this was just a one-time thing. So is it possible this signal could have come from maybe an alien spacecraft? Yeah, it's a possibility. The WOW signal is still known as the strongest candidate for extraterrestrial radio transmission ever detected. Alright, y'all know I love my cryptids, and these just might be the coolest cryptids I've ever heard of, neo-dinosaurs. I'd never heard about these till fairly recently. These are exactly what they sound like, sightings of dinosaurs in modern times. And yes, there have been multiple sightings of these things in the Amazon basin, in Bolivia, Colombia, Peru, and Brazil. The most common type of neo-dinosaur reported in the Amazon is a large, long-necked amphibious animal that looks a lot like a sauropod. Then there are ones that look like iguanodons and less frequently bipedal reptiles similar to Allosaurus. There have been tracks discovered that look like dinosaur-type footprints and actual sightings of the creatures themselves, if you can believe it, which most of you I'm sure can't. Fair play. One of the famous tales of these creatures comes from the British archaeologist and explorer Percy Fawcett. That's the guy who claimed to have found the lost city of Z. He claimed to have found these three-toed tracks in the forests of Brazil, and a friend of Fawcett claimed to have seen a large, long-necked reptile near the Brazil-Bolivia border. There were also reports of an iguanodon-like creature in Colombia in 1921, and a Brazilian named Alvaro Mesquita reported encountering a camptosaur-like animal on the shore of a swampy lake between the Purus River and the Juara River. And even as recently as 1995, geology students in Brazil's Sincora Mountains reported seeing two large creatures about about 30 feet long with 8-foot necks and tails bathing in a river. Very bizarre. And I can understand why some people may not believe this. I just think it's a really cool idea. One of the most awe-inspiring and well-documented UFO sightings came in 1997. It was March 13th in Arizona, a clear, starry night. People were just going about their usual business when, out of nowhere, strange lights started to appear in the sky. And no, they were not stars. First, there was this V-shaped formation of 5 lights slowly gliding across the state. The lights were first spotted in the town of Henderson, Nevada, around 7:55 p.m., and from there they made their way to Arizona, passing over Prescott and heading towards Phoenix. As the lights moved, more and more people saw them. Hundreds, maybe even thousands, looked up and saw this weird, silent, glowing formation. Some folks described it as a massive, solid object blocking out the stars as it passed. The police were flooded with reports. Phone lines were lighting up in news and radio stations, and the odd V-shaped craft wasn't the only one reported. A police officer in Paulden, Arizona would report seeing a cluster of orange-colored lights. And later, around 10 p.m., there were a number of reports in the Phoenix area of a row of brilliant lights hovering in the sky, or slowly falling. It later came out that the Air National Guard had been carrying out test flights that night, but people were skeptical, and till this day, people still don't buy the official explanation. As for why that is, well, we could do a whole video on this case, but essentially, the military said one of the light formations was a plane, and the other sets of lights were flares, and it just didn't look like that. The story of the Orang Medan is one of the creepiest and most mysterious sea tales out there. It all started in 1947 when a distress call came in from a Dutch freighter named the SS Orang Medan. The message: all officers, including the captain, are dead. Lying in chart room and bridge, possibly whole crew dead. Then there was some garbled Morse code, followed by the final words, "I die," which has always creeped me out. Rescue ships were quickly sent to check things out. When they boarded the ship, though, they found that the entire crew was indeed dead. Their bodies were scattered around the ship. Their faces were frozen in expressions of pure terror, and their arms were reaching out like they'd been trying to fight something off. There were no signs of physical injuries, though. The rescuers didn't have much time to figure things out either. Shortly after they arrived, a fire broke out in the ship's cargo hold. They had to abandon the vessel, which then exploded, sinking into the depths of the ocean. And another one of the most mysterious maritime tales in history is, of course, the case of the Mary Celeste. On December 4th of 1872, a ship called the Mary Celeste was found floating in the Atlantic Ocean. It was found completely empty of people, anyway. All the cargo, the food supplies, and the crew's belongings, they were all still in place. All that was missing was a single lifeboat. The Mary Celeste had left New York about a month earlier, led by Captain Benjamin Briggs. He was traveling with his wife, his young daughter, and 7 crew. The ship was headed for Italy. Now, everything seemed normal during the journey, and that's because we have the log entries. The last entry in the logbook, too, was just a regular note about the ship's position and weather. There were no clues in these logs about any sign of trouble. There was no sign of a struggle or any kind of damage to the ship. It looked like everyone had just calmly left in the lifeboat. But why? The weather was fine, the ship was in good shape. It was unlikely that pirates had attacked either, because again, nothing had been stolen, and there were no signs of violence. To this day, nobody knows what happened to Captain Briggs, his family, or the crew. With all that said, I've been your host, James, and I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video. In 1991, on, Pam Reynolds was about to go through a terrifying ordeal, brain surgery, but at least she'd be put to sleep. Little did she know the experience was about to be far more harrowing than she could have ever imagined. This was going to be a highly risky brain surgery, referred to as a standstill operation. Basically, she was going to be clinically dead. Her heart was stopped, her body temperature was lowered, and her brain was going to be unresponsive throughout the entire surgery. It was a pretty extreme measure, but it was the only way they were going to have a chance at removing the large aneurysm in her brain. It ended up being a success though, and Pam fully recovered. But she wasn't out cold like you'd think she would be. Pam described that throughout the surgery, she felt as if she was floating above her body, looking down at the operating room. She could see the doctors and nurses working on her. She saw her unresponsive, basically dead body. She even went into detail about the surgical instruments being used, including a unique saw used to open her skull. She also recounted conversations between the medical staff about her veins being too small and other stuff they talked about. It was pretty insane seeing as her eyes had been taped shut, her ears had been plugged with speakers emitting loud clicks to monitor her brain, and the fact that she was clinically dead throughout the operation. When Pam later recounted her experience, the doctors were completely stunned. The accuracy of her descriptions, especially the surgical tools and the conversations that she just had no way of hearing, it just left the doctors completely baffled. It's still cited as one of the most convincing cases of out-of-body experiences.
Mohenjo-Daro, an archaeological site in Pakistan, might just be evidence of an ancient nuclear war taking place that somehow this reality has completely overlooked. Unusual findings in the area include incredibly high levels of radioactivity in certain layers of soil that have been vitrified, which basically means that they have turned into a glass-like substance due to extreme temperatures, far hotter than any temperature reached by a simple primitive fire. These findings, paired with ancient texts describing advanced weapons with devastating abilities that could produce immense amounts of light and heat, have led many people to believe that an ancient nuclear battle did in fact take place in the area. But there is not enough evidence to definitively support that thought process, so many people believe that the battle actually took place in an alternate reality, after which the battlegrounds somehow ended up in our own. I mean, it would answer the questions of why the areas surrounding Mohenjo-Daro don't share the same anomalous features, but for now, it's anyone's guess, really.
Old Street in Liverpool is known for its trendy shops and cafes, but it's also become famous for something much stranger. Time slips. Stories of people suddenly finding themselves in a different time period. One of the most famous stories involves a man named Frank. Frank was a retired policeman, and one day in 1996, he decided to meet his wife for a coffee on Bold Street. As he walked down the street, he suddenly noticed that everything seemed oddly different. The modern shops had vanished, replaced by old-fashioned storefronts. The people around him were dressed in clothes from the 1950s, and classic cars were parked along the street. Confused and obviously a bit scared, Frank walked into a store called Cripps to buy something for his wife. As soon as he stepped inside, everything changed back to normal. The shop was a modern clothing store, and the old-fashioned atmosphere was gone. Had he just imagined the whole thing? Another strange story happened to a couple shopping on Bold Street in 2006. They were walking past a bookshop when the woman decided to go inside. As she entered, she felt an intense chill and then found herself in an old-fashioned bookstore. The shelves were lined with books that looked like they were straight out of the early 20th century. She quickly left the shop and, to her shock, found herself back in the present, with her husband wondering why she looked so shaken up. You'll find a whole bunch of stories like this online, and even people writing posts detailing their first-hand experiences. The Bold Street time slips have become an urban legend in Liverpool. So what's going on here? Are the stories completely bogus, or maybe just maybe, could there really be pockets of this street acting as portals to other periods in time?
While you might not consider 2006 historic, I guarantee this earth-shattering event will go down in history. Okay, maybe it's not earth-shattering, but it's definitely mind-boggling, and in my opinion, clear evidence of the possibility of an alternate reality. In 2006, a man named Derek Amato suffered a severe concussion after hitting his head on the bottom of a shallow swimming pool. The concussion caused Amato to suffer 35% hair loss as well as a fair amount of memory loss. It also caused him to become an incredibly talented composer, despite the fact that he'd never written music and had never practiced an instrument a day in his life, making this the only known case of someone gaining genius-level talent after suffering from severe head trauma. Amato said that after the incident, every time he closed his eyes, he would see black and white structures moving from left to right that represented his mind in a fluid, continuous stream of musical notation. It really makes no sense how this could have happened, until, of course, you take into account the possibility of alternate realities. Is it possible that when Amato hit his head, he entered into an alternate reality where at the same time the other him hit his head and they somehow switched places? If that's the case, I have to say I feel pretty bad for the other Amato who probably had a show coming up and now all of a sudden doesn't know a lick of music. Tough times.
In 1977, Kimberly Clark Sharp was treating a heart attack patient named Maria at Harborview Medical Center in Seattle. At one point, Maria flatlined. She was clinically dead. The doctors managed to resuscitate her though, and she later described having an out-of-body experience. While floating outside her body, she claimed to have seen a tennis shoe on a high ledge outside the hospital. The shoe was described in detail, a blue, scuffed-up tennis shoe. The story was pretty unbelievable. But all the same, Sharp thought, well, what the heck, I'm gonna take a look. And sure enough, right in the spot Maria had described, there was a scuffed up blue tennis shoe. The level of detail in Maria's account was so precise that it left some wondering if she really had left her body, crossing over into another reality before being brought back down to Earth.
Up first is the Carrington event. The Carrington event was the single most powerful geomagnetic storm ever recorded in human history. Humanity had never experienced a solar flare before and hasn't since. The entire planet was bathed with energy which caused an aurora so bright you could read in the dead of night. This event was named after Richard Carrington, the astronomer who identified the flare, and occurred on the 1st of September 1859. The surge of energy fried telegraph wires around the world, but even more strangely, people could communicate across unpowered telegraph wires, as the electromagnetic energy released from the sun essentially powered them. Several telegraph stations disconnected their batteries after almost being fried, only to discover they could still communicate using what they dubbed the auroral current. We have since witnessed a lot of solar flares. The world was just unlucky enough in 1859 to actually be hit by one, and quite a large one at that. It's believed that if a similar event were to happen again, it would cause between $1 and $3 trillion in damages and would fry essentially all consumer electronics around the world, leaving only highly shielded systems still functioning. Next is Comet West. Named after astronomer Richard West, when Comet West passed through the inner solar system in 1976, it was quickly noted as one of the brightest celestial objects to ever pass through our solar system, even appearing as brighter than Venus and Jupiter, or bright enough to study during the daylight. But what made it even more unique is that it may never be seen again. Oh, it's on an orbit that will take it back through our solar system in about 250,000 years. Now, on predictions like that, scientists build in a little bit of wiggle room. The comet may shed some mass as it orbits, but 240,000 years is still a long time. Will humanity even make it through the next 250 years? When Comet West passed overhead, it was incredibly impressive, carving a glittering path across the sky. But unlike most once-in-a-millennia event, scientists hardly made any fuss to the public at all. This is because just a little time before West arrived, another comet, Comet Kohoutek, had been hyped up heavily by the scientific community, only to be rather disappointing when it did show up. So scientists were a little apprehensive of hyping up the public only to disappoint the public again, resulting in most people missing one of the brightest comets ever seen in history, and one that will likely never be seen again. Next is Cyclone Katarina. Cyclone Katarina was not unique for its strength or its size, but its location. Also known as Hurricane Katarina, this was the only hurricane-level storm ever recorded in the South Atlantic. It made landfall in southern Brazil as a Category 2 hurricane and lost power rapidly, dying out 2 days later. What made it so unique was that the South Atlantic is historically known for having significantly less tropical storms than the North Atlantic and no hurricanes. This is due to several factors, a critical one being a powerful shear force wind that disrupts most cyclones before they can form into proper hurricanes. But also, the cooler waters of the South Atlantic mean there's less energy available to make a storm. However, in Katarina's case, the shear force winds were significantly lower than usual, and the sea temperature was noticeably higher than usual. These factors, along with a few other atmospheric anomalies, led to the formation of the first and so far only hurricane ever encountered in the South Atlantic. However, this may not be an anomaly for long, as rising sea temperatures will only encourage more frequent and stronger storms around the world. 1,500 homes were destroyed and more than 40,000 damaged, along with the destruction of 40% of the rice crop, in all amounting to about $350 million in damages which were incurred. Despite a successful evacuation, 3 people also lost their lives and another 75 were injured.
The North settled in Greenland around the 10th century, creating a colony that lasted for about 500 years. But then, in the late 15th century, they vanished. Now, it's not like it was uncommon for people to relocate back then, but what was strange about this was that they'd left behind a lot of their supplies and belongings. It was like they just evaporated. Historians and archaeologists still haven't come up with a clear answer. But there are theories. One is that environmental changes made life too hard for them, forcing the settlers to leave. Another is that local Inuits may have raided the colony, killing or capturing the settlers, but there weren't any clear signs of an attack. Everything had been left in a pretty tidy manner. If the Inuit had raided the colony, there would have been signs of a struggle, but the site had been found neat and intact. There's also the theory that a plague in the late 15th century, which hit Iceland and Norway, left many farms empty, meaning the Greenland settlers might have returned to Europe to claim the abandoned land, but that doesn't make much sense either. I mean, the Vikings back home would have known that these guys had returned. There wouldn't be much of a mystery, would there? This is a very strange case. Sacsayhuaman is an impressive Incan fort built in the 1400s, just outside of Cusco, Peru. The fort is famous for its massive stone walls, made from stones that each weigh around 100 to 120 tons. What's even more amazing, though, is how these stones fit together, which is perfectly. They also have these smooth finishes, almost like they were melted and then hardened again in a giant kiln. But back then there was no way they could have had a kiln big enough to do something like that. Researchers have been trying to figure out how the Incas managed to mold these stones for years. Some think they might have used mirrors or glass to focus sunlight and heat the stones until they were soft enough to fit together, but there's no evidence of a method like that having been used. Others have theorized that the stones may have been rough at first and then natural fires partially melted them together, but tests have shown that regular fires don't really get hot enough to melt the stone. Here's a theory for you. Maybe the Incas had some kind of a deal with a race of stone carving aliens, but I had to do it. In Jordan and Syria, there are mysterious stone circles spread across the desert plains. Some of these circles are huge. The smallest is about 720 feet wide, and the largest is more than 1,450 feet across. They're all between 3 and 5 feet high, and none of them have any openings or entrances, which is strange because if they'd been used to, say, house animals, you'd think there'd be doors or gates. By that same token, they don't really seem to have been used as burial sites either. The circles are incredibly well formed though, almost perfectly round, which is surprising given how old they are. Archaeologists think they were built between 4500 BC and 2000 BC, a span of about 2500 years, which really doesn't narrow down their purpose much. Researchers believe there were once even more of these strange stone circles, but many have been destroyed as new towns and settlements were built. Scientists are still trying to figure out why they were used and who built them. There's also a strange circle of stones in Miami. In 1998, while preparing to build new condos in South Beach, developers came across something they'd never seen before. As they were tearing down old buildings and digging deep into the ground, they discovered a circle of 24 large holes, each filled with heavy limestone tablets. This discovery was so unusual that they had to call in archaeologists to investigate. The archaeologists found that these stones were arranged in a perfect circle, about 38 feet across. They also uncovered other ancient items like animal bones, shark teeth, and old axe heads made of basalt rock. After studying the area, the experts estimated that the Miami Circle was about 2,000 years old. The circle is believed to have been created by the Tequesta people, a tribe that lived in the region until the early 18th century. The Tequesta were known to be nomadic. Today, the Miami Circle sits right in the middle of the city. Researchers are still studying the site and the artifacts, but the purpose of the circle and even a lot about the Tequesta themselves still a mystery. Alright, this story is one of the wildest and most mysterious tales from World War II. So in October of 1943 at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, the Navy was working on a top secret project to make ships invisible to enemy radar. The ship at the center of all this was the USS Eldridge. The story goes that they were using some kind of high-tech equipment involving powerful electromagnetic fields. When they turned on this equipment, something bizarre happened. The ship disappeared. Not just off radar, but physically vanished from sight. Some say it was teleported to Norfolk, Virginia, and then brought back to Philadelphia in just a few minutes. But the strangest part is what happened to the crew. When the ship reappeared, some sailors had been fused into the ship's metal. Others had gone missing entirely. The tale first came about in 1955 when a man named Carl Allen, who claimed to be a witness, sent a series of letters to a US Navy research organization and a UFO researcher. Of course, the Navy denies that the experiment ever took place, and the letters are often chalked up to a very creative hoax. But there is a small chance something really did happen that day. I mean, hey, who knows? None of us were there. The story of John Zegras is often referenced as one of the eeriest examples of an alternate reality crossing over into our own, at least in some versions of the story. Anyway, yeah, this one falls into the realm of urban legends, but it is a pretty great story all the same. The story goes that in 1954, at Tokyo's Haneda Airport, a man handed over his passport, leaving the officials in utter confusion. His passport was from a country called Torrid. If you're wondering what Torrid is, well, it doesn't exist. They looked at the man, and he seemed completely normal. He was well dressed and polite, but he insisted that Torrid was a real country located between France and Spain, and he was shocked when the officials told him that that place just didn't exist. The man had other documents too, like a driver's license and bank statements, all from this place called Torrid. His passport even had stamps showing he had traveled to other countries before. The officials were just completely baffled. They checked maps and globes, and they were like, are we just crazy? But no, there was no Torrid. They put him in a nearby hotel while they investigated further, and they posted guards outside his room just to make sure he didn't leave. But when they went in to check on him the next morning, he'd disappeared. The room was on a high floor, no balcony, and the guards swore they didn't see or hear anything strange during the night. His documents also disappeared, leaving no trace of the mysterious man from Torrid. No one could figure out where he came from or where he went. So where does John Zegras come into the picture? Well, there is a documented case of a foreign man being detained in Japan for identity fraud, but it's never been 100% verified if John Zegras' story spawned the legend of the Torrid man or if his case was completely unrelated.
Next is the Tunguska event. The Tunguska event is one of the strangest in all human history due to its devastating impact as well as its near total mystery. At 7 a.m. June 17th, 1908, several Russian villagers northwest of Lake Baikal saw a brilliant blue light as bright as the sun rip through the sky overhead before then impacting in the distance in a brilliant explosion of fire and light. Moments later, a sound like artillery fire swept over them, along with a shockwave so massive it shattered windows, homes, and trees for hundreds of kilometers. A fire wave scorched trees near the impact site for dozens of kilometers as well, and was noted to be equivalent to a low-yield nuclear explosion. The shockwave was so powerful, it was recorded on geological monitors as far away as Jakarta and Washington, D.C. The blast kicked up so much dust, debris, and ice that the reflected light allowed people to take well-lit photos without a flashbulb at night hundreds of kilometers away in 1908. It was eventually determined the asteroid that caused the blast was some 65 meters across and was the largest asteroid to impact the Earth during recorded human history. Thankfully, this record-breaking asteroid landed in a nearly entirely uninhabited part of the planet, or else the devastation would have been severe. Next is disease eradication. Humanity has made some pretty incredible advancements, especially when it comes to healthcare and disease control. However, only once in all of human history has the eradication of a disease occurred. Smallpox had been one of humanity's greatest threats for millennia and was even used as a biological weapon throughout history. It took a concerted effort from international health experts, teams, and organizations to inoculate the world and eradicate the disease. In 1979, it was declared that the disease had been fully eradicated, and by 1980, the World Health Assembly managed to confirm after heavy investigation that the disease was in fact eliminated in its entirety. This is an incredibly impressive achievement, but is somehow still an anomaly when we have the ability, if not the will, to eradicate numerous other diseases. Tuberculosis, for example, is eminently treatable and curable and could be eliminated as well, but is instead allowed to run rampant in many poor and disadvantaged communities. And finally is the dancing plague. Perhaps the strangest occurrence of mass hysteria in human history, the dancing plague happened in the village of Strasbourg in Alsace in 1518. It began when one woman, Frau Trophea, stepped outside her home and began to dance maniacally in the street. After over 2 weeks of dancing, she was then joined by others as more and more people were seemingly infected with this need to dance. This social contagion spread to a possible 400 people by August, and they danced continuously for weeks. Initially, the authorities turned to the physicians, who encouraged those afflicted to dance it out, bringing along musicians and even strong people to hold up those too exhausted to stay standing so they could keep dancing. This, unsurprisingly, only made things worse, and soon people were dropping to the floor, exhausted to the point of coma or simply outright deceased. Some estimates say that in this time, 15 dancers a day were passing away, and yet the rest continued to dance themselves to near death. Eventually, the dancers were dragged to a temple and ordered to undergo a ritual to cleanse themselves and be forgiven by Saint Vitus, which did actually work and ended the dancing plague. Some have said this was caused by ergot poisoning, a common grain fungus that causes hallucinations among other things. However, others say it was instead a mania induced by stress due to the severely harsh year the people of Alsace had, suffering through several famines, starvations, and war. No dancing plague has ever been recorded since.
Eric Hecker, a former Raytheon Technologies Corporation employee, made a controversial statement about his experiences in Antarctica. At a United States UFO disclosure meeting, Hecker claimed that he'd seen, quote, powerful machines in Antarctica that could potentially be used to, quote, contact alien crafts in deep space. He referred specifically to the Ice Cube Neutrino Observatory, a scientific facility in the South Pole, which he said wasn't just a listening device as it was advertised. According to Hecker, the device has the capacity to transmit signals and in fact may be part of a much larger and more secretive operation. He even went as far to say that the facility is, quote, the world's largest direct energy weapons system. So could there be some crazy hidden technology and government projects going on in the icy tundra of the Antarctic? And if so, could some of it come from somewhere beyond Earth? UFOs in Antarctica. It just goes together surprisingly well, and back in February, UFO enthusiasts claimed to have discovered what looks like a crashed extraterrestrial on a 6-mile wide island called Tuhamuk. The object, which some internet users believe to be a UFO, looks sorta like it has a domed top, wide rim, sort of a metallic appearance maybe. It seems to measure around 12 meters in width. The image of the object first showed up on Reddit, and it got people talking. Some are convinced that the shape and smoothness of the object can't be, or is at least very unlikely to be, a natural formation. There's comments like, it's obviously a craft, look at how smooth the curvature is. Another commenter wrote, if being eroded by a wave, It would not keep a consistent shape like that, and certainly not poking out the opposite way and even indenting in behind it, forming a perfect circle. The ones saying that it's ice are completely ignoring these facts. This is a wonderful find, end quote. Now, of course, others are dismissing it as just an interesting looking block of ice, but what do you all think? Operation Tabarin was a top-secret British mission during World War II, which ran from 1943 to 46. Its goal was to secure British control over parts of Antarctica that were contested by Argentina and Chile. To do this, the British set up permanent research stations and conducted scientific work, while also providing postal services and supporting weather observations, which were important for Allied shipping routes in the South Atlantic. The operation kicked off in 1943, right in the middle of the war, after the British government approved it. The team, led by Lieutenant Commander James Marr, set off from the UK in November that year, and by early 1944, they'd established 2 main bases. In 1944, Captain Andrew Taylor took over the operation. After Marr had to step down due to illness, new bases were set up, and they also brought sled dogs to help with the work and extended their research on the Antarctic mainland. During the winter months of 1944 and 45, the teams at the base faced extreme conditions, with 14 men staying through the winter in 1941, in 1944, and 21 the following year. By March of 1946, the mission came to an end though, and the work was handed over to the Falkland Islands Dependencies Survey, or the FIDS. This laid the foundation though for what would later become the British Antarctic Survey, or BAS, which still carries out scientific research in Antarctica to this day. But some think there's more to the story than what's been officially released. Some think Operation Tabarin also had a lot to do with monitoring a secret base built by the Third Reich. Now, while it is 100% true that the Germans had disguised ships sailing the Pacific to disrupt Allied shipping, some straying into the colder waters of the South Pole, there have also been rumors for decades that they established a secret base on the mainland. This theory goes way back to the aftermath of World War II and is often tied to ideas about high-ranking German officials escaping to Antarctica after the war, including the leader himself. The story got more attention when people claimed that a German U-boat was spotted in the South Atlantic in July of 1945, just months after Germany's surrender. The rumor really started to pick up in 1947, when a Hungarian named Ladislas Sabo suggested that the Germans had built a hidden base in Antarctica, possibly as a refuge or secret base to continue carrying out their work. The Germans did 100% briefly visit Antarctica in 1939. Supposedly it was only for a short time as part of a surveying expedition, but could they have established something more permanent? It's possible. Now, Antarctica today might be a frozen wasteland, but it wasn't always that way. In the distant past, long before it was covered by thick ice, Antarctica was a lush, warm region that was actually full of rainforests. There have been fossils discovered in the area that show millions of years ago the continent was full of tropical trees, forests, and it was full of animal life. One of the most fascinating discoveries are the fossilized wood and leaf imprints. Fossils from marine creatures, birds, even dinosaurs from the Cretaceous period have been found. It's hard to imagine now, but at one time Antarctica was very biodiverse. Scientists have also found the preserved forewings of beetles that lived between 14 and 20 million years ago, and tiny single-celled fossils. And here's a really strange one. They've even found 50-million-year-old sperm cells on the egg case of an extinct species of worm.
So this next video was courtesy of user Valhu on TikTok. They opened their front door to a creature that looks almost like a deer, but there's no ears and the eyes aren't in the right spots. So this is known as not deer in the cryptid community. And they're described as looking like a deer from a distance, but you get closer, you look at it longer, and you realize something just isn't right with how things are. Kind of like a bad puzzle. Their movements are described as similar to a newborn deer, but appearing as an adult, with some theories suggesting that the creature is double jointed, maybe has additional joints in its limbs. The most defining feature though is that not deers do not have eyes on the side of their head, but at the front, like a predator, like this video. They tend to hang out a lot in Tennessee, but granted this video did come from somewhere in Southern California, which, okay, like, you do you, maybe it traveled. I have theories that kind of relate back to alien beings and cryptids, but you don't need to hear me go on and blather on. I do that enough. So imagine that you're a homeowner. I know, big imagine in this economy. Heading out into your backyard to just throw away the trash, and then you're nose to nose with an alien. Now, I don't think that'll ever happen to me in this lifetime, mainly because I don't see myself owning a house in this economy, but anyways, we're gonna move on. I know folks who are homeowners that have dealt with bears invading the trash. They never tried to break through wooden doors. Very long story, happened to my dad, but anyways, back to aliens we go. So last June, there was a video that was circulating on the app formerly known as Twitter, and it depicted a non-human entity appearing briefly and blinking. The footage revealed a distinct form featuring two large eyes aligning with the caller's previous description. And this caller reported, there's like an 8-foot person beside it, and another one is inside it, and it has big eyes, and it's looking at us, and it's still there. Like, they were obviously panicking. Now, 3 men and a woman can be seen attempting to record the so-called non-human creature. Notably, one of them is armed with a personal safety device that I can't name by name. And all of them appear visibly frightened by the presence of this non-human entity that's just hanging out. Now, there's been no official statement by the police, but come on. So we got some video footage. There was a local newscast that broadcasted something, and it shows one officer walking into the backyard to be like, hey, we need to investigate. And there's a witness telling the police, I don't believe in it, but what I saw right now, I do believe in it. And I always say your greatest believers are always your biggest doubters originally. And the officer was like, yeah, you guys seem legit scared, so I don't blame you. Yeah. However, without any concrete evidence, the police has closed the case. But I don't know. What do you think you saw? So I'm not quite sure if this next thing is a large bug, an alien, or a UFO. So I'm gonna need your help to help me decipher just what on earth this, I don't know what it is. So there's a video. It's capturing this cloaked jellyfish-shaped object that's hanging out near, once again, a US military airbase, and it's caused a lot of chitter-chatter online. Everybody wants to know, what are we looking at? This very curious footage, recorded through a thermal imaging camera, kinda just adds to the complexity of UFO lore. So this video was initially shared by UFO investigator Jeremy Corbell, and it brought the incident into the public eye. He emphasized the incredible risk undertaken by an individual within military ranks to smuggle this footage into the public domain, because whistleblowers have a very bad history of disappearing if the government isn't happy, or just publicly discredited if their boss is in a good mood. So if we're going back to this jellyfish-looking unknown, I have a lot of questions. So this mesmerizing ballet unfolds as the unidentified, I don't know what, glides over a body of water, abruptly halts its movement, descends into the water with an almost ritualistic precision, and then for a suspended 17 minutes, embraces silence. And then, all of a sudden, it emerges from the water, launching itself into the sky at a 45-degree angle. So we do have an official statement from the Department of Defense. Sue Gao was like, oh, we have these very carefully crafted words, and she said, and I quote, because direct quotes, folks, we do not comment on the authenticity of alleged DoD material that may have been leaked. Okay. However, once again, folks, the Department of Defense is not exactly known for transparency. Yeah. So let's bring in some analysts, folks. One a Ross Coulthart, who kind of highlights the absence of a categorical denial. He's like, maybe this is a strategic maneuver by government entities. It's the nuanced dance of neither confirm nor deny.
Exploring woodland trails in the dead of night is not for the faint of heart, especially when you come across anomalies that your brain simply cannot make sense of. We know what a dog looks like, and we know what a pig looks like, but what happens when the two of them are combined together? The person who uploaded this seemed to have the same questions, keeping a close following on the strange animal that you see in the video. What's striking about this weird creature is that it almost looks as if two of its body parts do not belong together. Its head is much bigger than the rest of its smaller body, and the coloration of its fur does not match at all. There is a clear stripe that goes down its head, but stops immediately at its neck. And that's extremely unusual. This spliced creature seems to also carry its prey with ease, not tiring in the slightest despite its size comparison. If you come across its path, would you also be brave enough to follow it? At least with animal-like anomalies, our brains can easily categorize the creature as some sort of species that maybe hadn't been discovered yet until that very day. But what if it was a supernatural monster that looked eerily similar to a human? Taking a nighttime ride on their bikes, a group of guys come across this eerie person-like form, except they are completely bare from head to toe, without even a speck of hair on their head. This is not at all like a normal thing to come across in an open area. I'm getting extremely uncanny valley vibes the longer I look at at this thing. The way it carries its arms and how it walks. And not to mention the slow turnaround it does when it's approached by the bikers. Extremely bold of them, might I add. It almost unironically reminds me of a Ken doll, completely stripped of everything that remotely resembles a normal human being. Something is just not right about this video. And like the two bikers in the beginning of the video, you will not catch me sticking around to find out what that thing is. There is something magical and almost fairy-like about wanting to walk around in the woods in a delicate nightgown and maybe some braids in my hair and flowers. But in the daytime, not in an absolute pitch black forest where I can't even see 5 feet in front of me. Environment and atmosphere is everything when it comes to photography, and this trail cam photo definitely nailed the taking of Deborah Logan look. As you can see, this still image shows what may appear to be an older woman walking through the woods at night. I say older because of the vintage nightgown, which I totally don't own myself. The owner of this trail cam is unknown, and I think that makes it all the more scary. Where did it come from? Who is this strange woman? And will we ever find out why she's out in the woods by herself? All I know is I hope she's all right. Having the safety of a car when traveling alone at night definitely brings me more comfort and ease knowing that there is at least some sort of barrier between me and whatever may be out there lurking within the darkness. An account named Creepy Outdoors on TikTok uploaded this video online, showing what appears to be a solar hiker trying to enjoy a peaceful night alone out in a forest trail. Now, I'm not the one to judge, but you should always make sure to have someone with you when you're being this brave. Throughout his journey, the man felt off and decided to end his journey early. However, finally making it back into that safe barrier of his car, he started to hear a strange knocking coming from the back window. This happens multiple times, and the second time sounding more urgent and slightly aggressive than the first. Finally being taken out of freeze mode, the hiker goes to investigate, only to find something he truly wishes he didn't see. A handprint is outlined on the back window, only it wasn't a human, as he lightly outlines with his finger of its rough shape. Thankfully, the TikToker is safe and nothing else came out of this encounter. But still, what could have possibly been knocking that much to get his attention? Especially if it wasn't a human that was doing it. I truly do believe there are hidden secrets that our Earth holds from us, and whether it be from the government or something completely out of this world, I aim to keep an open mind about them. As my jealousy exceeds me, these two hikers were given the opportunity to catch such a sighting. Or so they claim. They appeared to be in a canyon of sorts, and seemingly had stopped in the middle of their journey because they allegedly saw a door open on the side of a hillside wall. This is actually disturbing because as they zoom in on the hill, you can actually see a door-shaped cutout within the rock. I feel if I do look at it long enough, my brain will start to make me think, or make me see it opening and closing as well. My guess is, there's gotta be something sort of secret base in there if what they're telling us is true. Now I want to go out there and find out for myself. But like always, only in the daytime, and maybe with 5 to 10 friends supporting me. If I had a Casper the Friendly Ghost type of situation, I wouldn't mind having a ghost in my home. We'd play Jenga, Scrabble, maybe even the Ouija board if they've got some post-life gossip they want to share. But if it's a full-on black shadow like the one in the video here, straight to the market. I'm not staying in that place another minute. It starts off with a normal family interaction of a mother asking her daughter to help around with some household chores, and quickly pans the camera from one part of the room to the next, quickly glancing over the entrance of a hallway. In the back area of the hallway, we see a dark shadow, almost with the outline of a person before it's taken off screen. However, when the woman pans back, it's gone. Allegedly, they move out of the house. Thank you for not making the stupid decision by staying there. I'm looking at you, Paranormal Activity franchise. I still love you though. But in their new home, the mother states that she had been smelling sulfur constantly, and insects kept popping up around their home. I honestly don't know what's worse, a ghost or a house centipede. I'd rather not be able to see anything though, so I'll go with the ghost demon thingy personally. You are not safe anywhere when it comes to ghosts, not even in your own workplace. This video is somewhat sad because this officer in the video seemed so sincere in his answer when he was talking to a sweet old lady by the name of Miss Abigail. Another officer, who is the one filming this, sees the interaction going on with her coworker. Eventually, she buzzes him through the walkie asking, "Who are you talking to?" He states he's talking to Miss Abigail, and I quote, "A lovely lady who wanted to get into the building to see someone named Mr. Griffin, but was told to come back tomorrow since they were closed. Heck no. If that was really a ghost he was talking to, and this wasn't a stunt that people claim it to be, you never open the door. It's like a vampire. Once they're invited in, they're in. What if this was a demon taking the past woman's appearance to gain entry? Since they are known to take the shapes of the innocent to trick humans. Carrying on, the coworker tells him that this Miss Abigail person had been passed on for 2 years already, and that she cannot see the person he was talking to through the door. When the cop makes that realization that it's a supposed ghost, he absolutely books it. You really saved yourself there, dude. Who knows what could have happened if you opened that door. I'm not surprised. I was gonna get into some Canadian anomalies at some point, but thankfully, this one is another scientifically cool one than a spooky one. How would y'all react if you were hiking in a Canadian forest one day, only to be met with the ground literally breathing beneath you? I think I was in some sort of Lord of the Rings movie, or I was finally going to get my moment of becoming the main character of an unwritten fantasy story. The video footage of this anomaly is extremely fascinating to me rather than creepy. The way the ground is literally expanding itself, the roots of large trees even moving with it. Because with situations like these, there has to be some sort of scientific proof. And there is. It's the wind. To quote, during a rainstorm and windstorm event, the ground becomes saturated, loosening the soil's cohesion with the roots as the wind is blowing on the tree's crown. The wind is trying to push the trees over, and as the force is transferred to the roots, the ground begins to heave. What strikes me as fantastic is that these trees in the video are not falling over from the force. They are so rooted into the ground as the earth does this cool breathing exercise thing I've been taught in vocal classes. Straight down into the diaphragm, guys. One of my favorite Earth phenomena definitely be the eternal flame. That is straight up a fantasy tale within itself, but it's not. It's all back down to science. The eternal flame is situated just within the heart of a 30-foot high cascade waterfall that flows between 2 different sections of the anomaly. It was once speculated that this flame is being produced by natural gases from the shale, and that it emits 1 kilogram of methane daily. However, it's been discovered that this is indeed false. The rock beneath the waterfall isn't hot or cold enough to create the gas pockets required to break down the carbon molecules in the shale that creates natural gas. There must be another reason why there is a continuous gas supply, but scientists still aren't entirely sure why it's happening. However, if we want to get all mythological about it, let's get into some non-scientific reasons for it. It starts with Roman mythology, with the eternal flame being rooted with deities, especially talking about Vesta, or Estia, goddess of the hearth, home and domesticity when referring to Greek mythos. The fire was created when Jupiter, or Zeus, entrusted Vesta in keeping a portion of primordial flame to allow it to continue burning as a symbol of the god's loyalty of looking after the Roman people. Just the right amount of spooky and cool scientific discoveries when we're exploring anomalies.
In the late 1970s, images taken by the Viking orbiter revealed a curious formation in the Cydonia region that appeared to resemble a human face. This face on Mars has ignited imaginations around the world, with some speculating about ancient Martian civilizations or hidden messages left by extraterrestrials. But is it really a face, or just a trick of light and shadow on a rugged landscape? Later missions, including high-resolution imagery from Mars Global Surveyor, have shown that this face is simply a natural mesa, a hill sculpted by wind and erosion. Despite the overwhelming evidence that it is a geological feature, the mystery still lingers. The enduring allure lies in how our brains are wired to recognize faces even where none exist, a phenomenon called pareidolia. Imagine watching mysterious, dark lines appear on a slope with the change of seasons, lines that might hint at the presence of liquid water. These features, known as reoccurring slope lineae, were first noticed in high-resolution images from orbiting spacecraft. Initially, scientists were excited by the possibility that briny water might be trickling down Martian hillsides during the warmer months, potentially offering clues about Mars' habitability. However, as more data poured in, alternative explanations emerged. Some researchers now believe that these streaks could be dry, granular flows, movements of sand and dust driven by seasonal temperature changes rather than water. Yet, the debate is far from over. The fine details of the RSL's behavior continue to puzzle experts, keeping alive the tantalizing possibility that Mars might harbor conditions favorable for life, at least in its past, if not today. If you've ever seen a dust devil on Earth, you know that they can be both mesmerizing and unpredictable. On Mars, these phenomena take on an even more epic scale. Towering dust devils, sometimes spanning hundreds of meters in diameter, have been captured by rovers like Spirit and Opportunity. They not only whisk Martian dust around, but they also play a crucial role in cleaning the solar panels of these robotic explorers, an essential survival trick on a planet where every watt counts. Moreover, Martian dust devils can generate powerful vortices that expose hidden layers of rock and dust, revealing the planet's geological history in unexpected ways. Their mysterious origins and immense scale continue to intrigue researchers who wonder how such dynamics operate in Mars' thin atmosphere. These swirling storms offer a vivid reminder that even on a seemingly barren world, natural forces are at work in dramatic, sometimes unpredictable ways. Take a look at a map of Mars and you'll notice a startling contrast. The northern hemisphere is relatively smooth and low-lying, while the southern hemisphere is rugged, heavily cratered, and ancient. This phenomenon, known as hemispherical dichotomy, has left scientists scratching their heads for decades. Why would a planet have such a stark division in its terrain? One prevailing theory suggests that a colossal impact in Mars' distant past could have reworked half of its crust, while another hypothesis points to differences in volcanic activity and mantle dynamics between the two halves. What makes this anomaly so captivating is not only the dramatic visual difference, but also what it implies about Mars' geological evolution. The dichotomy holds clues to the planet's internal processes, its volcanic history, and even its potential to have supported life. As researchers continue to piece together Mars' tumultuous past, this enduring mystery remains one of the planet's most debated and fascinating features. Today, Mars is largely magnetically inert, a stark contrast to Earth's vibrant, protective magnetic field. Yet, scattered across its surface are regions with intense magnetic anomalies, remnants of a time when Mars might have boasted a global magnetic field. These pockets of magnetism, preserved in the crust, offer a glimpse into a bygone era when Mars may have shielded its surface from harmful cosmic radiation. What makes these magnetic stripes so perplexing is their irregular distribution and strength. Unlike Earth, where magnetic reversals have left clear, symmetrical patterns in the ocean floors, Mars' magnetized regions seem patchy and kind of disjointed. This discrepancy has spurred a host of theories, from a giant impact event that disrupted its magnetic field to internal cooling processes that shut down its dynamo. Each hypothesis adds another layer to the mystery of Mars' evolution, leaving us to wonder how a planet once brimming with magnetic energy could become so mysteriously dormant. While exploring Mars, the Opportunity rover stumbled upon something unexpected: small spherical concretions, affectionately dubbed blueberries. Composed mainly of hematite, these tiny spheres are not only visually striking, but also scientifically significant. Their formation suggests that liquid water once circulated in the region, precipitating the minerals that eventually coalesced into these perfect little balls. What makes the blueberries so fascinating is the precision of their formation process, which remains partly shrouded in mystery. Were they slowly formed in standing water, or did they result from more dynamic, possibly even episodic, chemical reactions? Their discovery has been a key piece of evidence in the ongoing quest to understand the red planet's climactic evolution, making these small spheres a disproportionately big enigma in Martian geology.
Staying within the woods for a short period of time for a little hike is all fine and dandy. What if you choose to stay there for multiple nights? By yourself? This camper is much braver than me, and thankfully recorded his journey of a strange anomaly that happened to him on his solo trip. It was all fine in the beginning, until things began to happen as his journey progressed into the nighttime. Hearing some noises outside, he proceeds out of his camper with caution, only to notice the flickering of a light way off in the distance. Getting closer to it, he notices that it's a flashlight that wasn't left by him. Clearly, he wasn't alone in these woods. And I quote from him, a flashlight just doesn't fall out of the sky. Taking a break and trying to compose himself, he steps away from the flashlight after taking it with him, only to come back and notice that it was turned on and moved from the original spot he placed it down in. You've got to be kidding me. I'd pack up and leave right after that. But clearly this guy was no quitter and proceeded to stay the night, even sleeping it off, before making it to the morning and leaving as soon as the sun came up. He was incredibly lucky nothing had happened to him, and I think it's better we never find out who or what was playing this sick joke on him, because for all we know, it could have been someone with not so great intentions. Being able to catch a real ghost on camera has and always will be one of the greatest achievements of our lifetimes. Whenever I go hiking out in the woods, I always like to record my findings, but I don't know how I feel when it comes to much older buildings. The man recording this video seemingly comes out of the brush after hiking for a bit and stumbles upon a church. I don't blame him for wanting to record, as old-style churches are incredibly beautiful and intricate in its design. However, as it pans down to get a view of the whole building, we see that there is a woman there watching him film, probably wanting to introduce himself and maybe explain why he's taking a video. It only gets all the more scarier as the woman disappears completely as he turns the corner. And I do mean completely. The only logical explanation, if you would call it that, is that she had gone through the wall itself. It was never explained who this girl was, and the hiker never sees her again after that. But if it was truly a ghost, I personally wouldn't stay any second longer in that location. Were you the type of child that liked to run on all fours? Or would you run up the stairs like a dog or a cat? I definitely was, because it was fun, silly, and harmless. Would you say the same if it came to seeing it outside in the darkness? Seeing this video definitely freezes me in place, as we clearly see what may appear to be a child or a woman standing on all fours, aggressively shaking their head in an unnatural way. If I were to come across this and saw that thing down the trail, you better believe I'm turning in the opposite direction. I am not playing here. Not to mention the way it's standing, how all its limbs are completely straightened out, not like how humans will have a natural bend in their knees or arms when placing themselves in this position. If this came running towards you at full speed, what do? I think my heart would stop, and I'd give up and let the creature take me. Maybe it'll raise me as one of their own. Who knows? Now these next group of guys are smart. You always want to stick together as a group when exploring forest trails in the dark. And even better that they have bikes. All the more easier to get away from whatever could be chasing you within the dark, confusing landscape of the woods. This one you really need to slow down and watch carefully, because you might just miss it. It all happens so fast, mainly because of the speed that these guys are tearing up. But right at the beginning, you can see our main guy with the GoPro swerve out of the way from what appears to be a figure dressed in all black, with the only clear area of skin that's shown is its hand. The creature seemed to also completely unbothered, especially when two bikes had already passed. This strikes me as very odd. Not even a single reaction coming from the anomaly. Some speculate that it was some sort of witch, which isn't a bad guess, and considering the tattered, long black clothing that they were wearing, which stereotypical cartoon witches wear. I've only heard stories of unknown creatures running across the front of a car of a dark trail, and I'm glad it's only that I've experienced. With the lack of streetlights and only being dependent on the soft glow of your headlights, who knows what you'll find out there within the comfort of a dark forest. Right as the car turns the corner, we see far off into the distance of what appears to be an incredibly large beast bolt across the street, as if they're the ones being surprised by the sudden appearance. Are you kidding me? I'm terrified of you, pal. You're the size of 6 of me stacked up. And if you look closely, were those 2 tails I saw? Or antennas? Who's ready to go on a hike or camping trip with me after that? Don't worry, I'll make sure we're out before the sun goes down. There was a story that was recorded all the way back in 1803 in Japan, and it was about a beautiful woman who was washed to shore wearing weird clothing and carrying a large box. The locals couldn't understand her nor the strange writing on the box, but the tale was then called Utsuro Bune, or hollow ship, and apparently has been happening in Japan going as far back as the early 17th century. The person who had spent their time studying this was Professor Tanaka Kazuo from Gifu University. humanity and has found a total of 11 documents about this strange event. This all started when a cult attacked a subway back in 1995 Japan. During his research on the paranormal revolving around cult leaders, he stumbled upon the Utsuru Bune legend. The strangest thing about these findings, though, was that despite not having substantial physical evidence, the collection of stories over centuries sparked huge interest. Many of these stories differ from each other, with some saying that the girl had been nursed back to health by some local people, and in turn gave them the secrets of sericulture when she passed on and became a silkworm. Others give incorrect information about where the location of the craft had washed up, and to this day it is still a strange documented story. Tanaka, however, finds the most strangest piece of writing to be the one from 1803, since the images on it looked eerily similar to that of a flying saucer we talk about today. Or it could have been a huge coincidence and we all took bits and pieces from this story as well, modernizing it and, spicing it up a little bit. I feel it was probably based on something that really happened, but Japan has largely closed off since then, so if there was a wreck of a foreign ship or foreign people had arrived in the country, it would have been a huge event and a government official would have investigated and left a public document, states Tanaka. Could you imagine being someone that accidentally stumbles upon a 9,000-year-old underwater Stonehenge? Obviously not the real Stonehenge, but still an underwater structure with petroglyphs on it? This one was discovered in Lake Michigan's Grand Traverse Bay and was accidentally discovered with sonar techniques, which are generally used for shipwrecks. Mark Hawley, a professor who teaches underwater archaeology at Northwestern Michigan University College, says this: "When you see it in the water, you're tempted to say that is absolutely real. But that's what we need the experts to come in and verify." He was the one who had also made the discovery back in 2007. The boulders that had the markings on them were 5 feet long and roughly 4 feet in height. These markings are what made them assume that it could be an ancient petroglyph that happened just after the Ice Age. One that's been shared to the public looks similar to an elephant. The researchers, however, who study petroglyphs wanted more proof to really clarify that it was what they claimed it to be. And Mark stated, "Excerpts in petroglyphs generally don't dive, so we're running into a little bit of a stumbling block here. You're telling me these scientists just possibly discovered new ancient creations and you won't take the chance to go and dive in yourself? That would open up even more questions about how it originally got submerged, maybe even giving us more information on how the land was set up back then." I don't know, I'm not a scientist. Sadly, there's not that much else on the matter at the current time, but still super cool nonetheless. Don't worry, I didn't forget about the spooky ghost anomalies either. I still have a few stuffed animals in my home from my childhood, but if I ever saw them stretching their neck up like that on their own, straight to the garage sale. Better yet, I'm putting it through that scene at the end of Toy Story 3. You know the one I'm talking about. I'm not sure who the original uploader of this post is, but he got some wicked footage of a stuffed giraffe being pulled up by its head. At first, I thought it was AI because of how he kept blurring the camera. Yeah, thanks for that. But as this video goes on, I'm starting to realize, no, this is very real. Now, I don't know if there is probably some guy behind the wall or something with a string, but that giraffe's head is going straight up, and I'm personally not seeing any string or fishing line reflecting off the camera's light. I swear there is also something wrong with us wanting to get closer to things that we can't comprehend. But it's also got me asking questions like, why is the giraffe there in the first place? This doesn't necessarily look like an abandoned home, but I guess somewhat of a school maybe? Either way, you touched it by kicking it at the end of the video, and therefore you've made it latch onto you now. Good luck.
But you don't need to look to the distant past to find fascinating ecosystems in Antarctica. Turns out that beneath the ice sheets, there's an entire network of underground lakes. In 1970, scientists first detected the existence of these lakes using radar technology, and it turns out there are about 400 subglacial lakes scattered across the continent. The lakes are found under several kilometers of ice, and they've been kept liquid because of the intense pressure from the ice sheet above it. The weight of the ice actually prevents the water from freezing, despite, being in Antarctica. One of the most famous of these lakes is Lake Vostok, which was discovered by Russian scientists in the 90s. It is the largest subglacial lake in Antarctica, and the third largest lake in the world by volume, sitting about 3.5 kilometers or over 2 miles under the ice. What makes Lake Vostok especially cool though is that it's been sealed off from the outside world for over 20 million years. But in recent years, scientists have drilled into the ice to get samples from the lake and other subglacial lakes in Antarctica, and they found some cool stuff. In 2014, for example, scientists studying Lake Whillans, nearly a kilometer beneath the ice, found this active ecosystem of microorganisms living in the lake. The tiny creatures have been totally isolated from sunlight and fresh air for millions of years. Is what you're looking at here a natural formation? Well, it's fun to imagine that it isn't, that at some point in the distant past, pyramids similar to the ones in Egypt were built by some long-lost civilization in Antarctica. And to be fair, there are some pretty incredible looking pyramid-like formations in Antarctica that look almost too perfect to be naturally forming, but the pyramid-like structure is officially part of a mountain range called the Ellsworth Mountains, the highest mountain range in Antarctica. They were first discovered during the British Antarctic expedition of 1910 to 1913. A mountain peak poking out of the ice, certainly less interesting than an ancient alien pyramid, so I don't think the rumors and speculations are going anywhere, especially because there's lots of other strange stuff said to go on in Antarctica. But here's something really unsettling about the region. All the dangerous stuff frozen in the ice that could cause problems if it were to thaw out. Scientists have dug up ancient ice cores and found bacteria that have been frozen solid. These bacteria can go into kind of a deep freeze mode where they don't really do anything but sit, waiting for better conditions. When the ice thaws, these bacteria can sometimes wake up, if you will, and start growing again though. In 2007, scientists in Antarctica found microorganisms trapped in ice that had been frozen for up to 8 million years. The tiny life forms were stuck in the ice, basically in a deep freeze, and when they were brought back to the warm lab, they began coming back to life and started to grow again. Scientists have also found old viruses frozen in layers of ice and permafrost. These viruses could be tens of thousands of years old, preserved in a state of suspended animation. Again though, they can potentially come back to life if the ice melts. When researchers thaw out samples from the ice, they can sometimes get these ancient viruses to reactivate. Seems like a bad idea, but understanding these viruses helps scientists learn more about how life and pathogens have evolved over time. Of course though, there's a lot of risk involved, and these viruses being released in an uncontrolled way could be very, very bad. Kimberly Miner, a climate scientist at the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory at the California Institute of Technology in Pasadena, say that 5 times fast, well, she had this to say: "There's a lot going on with the permafrost that is of concern, and it really shows why it's super important that we keep as much of the permafrost frozen as possible." No kidding. Alright, so in 2019, a team of researchers made a pretty mind-blowing discovery in the Scotia Sea, just north of Antarctica. They were part of the International Ocean Discovery Program, and while they were drilling into the seafloor, they ended up finding ancient DNA buried about 584 feet under the ocean floor. The researchers were able to figure out that this DNA was about 1 million years old, making it the oldest DNA ever discovered in seafloor sediments. Before this, the oldest DNA found in the sediments was only about 650,000 years old, so yeah, they shattered that record. You might think it's crazy that DNA could survive for so long, especially sitting at the bottom of the ocean, but Antarctica's cold temperatures helped preserve it. Plus, the deep sea doesn't get much sunlight, so the DNA wasn't damaged by harmful UV radiation like it would be if it were exposed on land. The big mystery, though, is what species this DNA came from. The researchers aren't entirely sure yet, but they know it's not from a virus or a bacteria. So this discovery opens up all sorts of cool possibilities. Start with something really cool, go bro. This site, buried deep in the Sahara Desert in Niger, was discovered in 2000 by a team of archaeologists led by Paul Serrano. The site is full of burial grounds, some dating back as far as 10,000 years. And back then the Sahara looked a lot different. It's a barren desert now, but 10,000 years ago, this place hadn't fully dried up. There was still plenty of lush greenery and lakes in certain spots. Goboro is one of those places that gives us a glimpse into a time when the Sahara wasn't the barren desert we know today. The people who lived here were a mix of hunter-gatherers and early farmers, and they coexisted with domesticated animals like cattle. That's pretty wild when you think about how we picture the desert now. When archaeologists found the burial sites, they came across human remains alongside cattle and other animals, and all in a spot that's now a literal graveyard. What's eerie about it is that these bones are just sitting there in the desert, an ancient snapshot of life from a time when the Sahara was a far different place. The way things shift from green to desert is kind of crazy to think about, and the fact that we still find these clues buried in the sand kind of gives you the chills. The Quaramatus hediensis was a giant prehistoric catfish basically, and it lived around 37 million years ago. But what does that have to do with the Sahara Desert? Well, the remains of one was discovered in 2017 in Egypt, and the thing was about 6.5 feet long. Now, catfish aren't exactly the type of creatures that jump out at you as being scary, but a catfish the size of a taller than average person, kind of freaky. And massive sized catfish weren't the only large sea creatures that once lived in the area. A long time ago, what's now the Sahara Desert was underwater. Scientists have found fossils of giant sea snakes, whales, and all kinds of other animals that lived there between 150 million years ago. According to Maureen O'Leary, the lead scientist on this study, the area looked more like modern Puerto Rico back then. A warm, sunny place with mangroves, mollusks, and a coastline full of wildlife. One of the coolest things they found is that a lot of these sea creatures grew way bigger than anything we see today. Some sea snakes were up to 12.3 meters or just over 40 feet long. O'Leary and her team think this could have been a case of gigantism, where animals get bigger in isolated places like islands, saying, quote, maybe this island gigantism can pertain to islands of water. Basically, when a sea like this one would move in and out, it could have created little pockets of water where animals grew larger, with more food and fewer predators. People in northern Mali, where these fossils were found, have known about this ancient sea for a long time. O'Leary remembers locals telling her they'd find marine shells and know that they came from an old sea. Speaking of sea creatures in the Sahara, Wadi al-Hitan, or Whale Valley, is found in the Egyptian desert and is packed with some absolutely incredible fossils. This site actually shows how whales evolved from land mammals into the ocean-dwelling creatures we know today. You'll find fossils from ancient whales like Basilosaurus and Dorudon, but also remains from sea cows, elephants, crocodiles, and sea turtles and sea snakes. What makes this place so special is the sheer number and quality of the fossils. Some even still have their stomach contents preserved, giving researchers a rare peek into their diet. The fossils found here help scientists piece together the environment of the past and track the evolutionary journey of whales. With hundreds of well-preserved remains, Wadi al-Hitan is a very important site for understanding how whales made their transition from land to sea. And one of the coolest finds in Egypt's Whale Valley are the remains of Archaeoceti, an ancient proto-whale type creature that once roamed both land and sea. These whales lived millions of years ago and had legs. One fossil that was found is around 69 feet long, which is impressive, but the coolest part is that this Archaeoceti had feet and toes. These things didn't just swim around in the water, but they spent time on land as well. The fossil is evidence of this transitional phase in whale evolution, showing us that whales didn't start out as full ocean creatures, but at one time were land-dwelling animals that evolved into the massive sea creatures that we know today. Ever get that eerie feeling when you walk through a big empty place? Maybe you're the last one to close up at work for the night, or you find yourself in a shopping mall near closing time and there's no one around. What should be a busy place full of life is now still and eerily quiet. Well, imagine that, only now you're walking through a ghost town in the middle of the Sahara Desert. So this is absolutely nuts. We've seen a lot of UAPs in the news so far this year, but this just takes things to a whole other level. So back in March in Buga, Colombia, this mysterious metal sphere about the size of a grapefruit was found sitting in a field. It weighed around 4.5 pounds and was made of multiple layers of metal with a tiny microchip buried in the center. I don't know why I'm saying was. It is. I mean, they have this sphere. These images of it are very real. Now, what got everyone talking though were the strange symbols on the surface of it. That and the fact that people said they saw the sphere zipping through the sky in the days leading up to it being found. So the symbols don't match any known language, but they look almost ancient or alien-like. Scientists and engineers examined the thing, and while it clearly wasn't just a chunk of scrap metal, nobody could agree on where it came from. So far, no one's claimed it. No factories nearby made anything like it, and it wasn't a leftover from any known satellite or drone. So what the hell is this thing? An alien probe? Some kind of lost technology? At this point, no one has any idea. In late 2024, scientists spotted something very strange. Earth had picked up a second moon. So a small asteroid about 10 meters wide was temporarily caught by our planet's gravity and orbited us for nearly 2 months before drifting away into space. The object, named 2024 PT5, is believed to actually contain material from the moon itself, meaning it could be a chunk that broke off during a past impact and ended up circling Earth. These kinds of temporary moons are extremely rare though, and most go completely unnoticed. On Christmas Day in 2024, in the small town of Kilcoman in Ireland, a father and son saw something very strange in the sky at around 6:09 p.m. They described seeing this group of star-like lights behaving in a way that stars definitely should not. One of the witnesses told the press, "I noticed one of what I believed to be stars in the sky moving all of a sudden. I pointed it out to my dad and we began observing it. Then it stopped dead in its tracks. Maybe 5 seconds later, more of these stars began moving. It was here we realized these weren't stars." So in total, they saw 4 to 5 of these white lights. They moved at speeds faster than a commercial airplane, over 1,000 kilometers per hour, and made no sound at all. The witness also added, "The one that stopped then began moving once again, and I counted 4 while my dad counted 5 of these white lights moving quickly across the sky until they vanished into thin air one by one. This left us very confused and scared." So far, they haven't reported the sighting to authorities, but they're thinking about contacting a group that looks into unidentified aerial phenomena. In May of 2024, Earth got hit by a series of major solar storms, the strongest we've seen in decades. Between May 7th and 11th, the sun fired off several huge solar flares and at least 7 coronal mass ejections. These are massive bursts of charged particles, and they were headed straight for Earth at insane speeds, up to 3 million miles per hour. That sounds so crazy saying it out loud. Well, what happened was a G5 level geomagnetic storm. G5 is apparently the highest possible rating. It caused some pretty unusual effects, like the northern lights being visible as far south as Texas and parts of southern Europe. GPS systems were acting up too, and farmers in the Midwest actually had trouble with their high-tech tractors because of it. There's a strange spot in the Indian Ocean where the sea level is about 100 meters lower than it should be. And no, it's not because of a hole in the ocean. It's a gravity anomaly, meaning gravity is a bit weaker there, so water doesn't pile up like it does in other areas. This spot is called the Indian Ocean Geoid Low, and it's been confusing scientists for years. But now researchers think it's caused by chunks of old seafloor that sank deep into the earth millions of years ago, combined with rising plumes of hotter, lighter rock. They've created a region with less mass under the surface, which means weaker gravity above it. It's a weird part of our planet. That's basically what I'm getting from this. In December of 2024, people in northern Vermont, upstate New York, and even Atlanta started spotting strange drone formations flying low over neighborhoods and back roads. These things had bright flashing lights, made almost no sound, and were flying in these coordinated patterns. What exactly were they? Where were they from? We still don't know. They don't look like your average hobby drones though. Local police, the FAA, nor the military have taken responsibility. A drone expert named William Austin looked into it and apparently thinks most of these sightings were probably just people mistaking planes or regular drones for something more mysterious. But are you guys buying that? A lot of people are saying this could have been some sort of government testing or obviously aliens.
Venture near the Martian South Pole and you'll encounter a landscape that looks like it's been etched by alien creatures. Radial channels and patterns resembling spider legs, collectively known as areniform terrain. These formations arise from the sublimation of carbon dioxide ice during the spring. As the frozen CO2 turns directly into gas, it builds pressure beneath a translucent ice layer until it erupts, carving out intricate branching channels in the process. This dynamic process, unique to Mars, offers a captivating glimpse into the planet's seasonal rhythms. The exact mechanics and variability of these spider formations are still under study, making them one of Mars' most visually arresting and scientifically puzzling phenomena. Their alien appearance and the dramatic natural forces that shape them capture the imagination, challenging our perceptions of what a cold, desolate world can be capable of. When we think of earthquakes, we usually picture the trembling ground on our home planet, but Mars, too, experiences its own kind of seismic activity. Marsquakes. Detected by NASA's InSight lander, these tremors provide a rare window into the interior of the red planet. Marsquakes are less frequent and generally less intense than earthquakes here on Earth, but they pack a significant scientific punch. They help researchers map the Martian interior, revealing details about the planet's crust, mantle, and core. However, the origin of many of these quakes remains elusive. Some might be the result of cooling and contraction of the planet, while others could be linked to volcanic or tectonic activity that we have yet to fully understand. The intermittent nature of these seismic events keeps scientists on their toes, as each new quake adds a piece to the puzzle of Mars' inner workings. In essence, Marsquakes not only shake the surface, they shake up our understanding of the planet's geological past and present. Methane on Earth is often associated with life, and for years, scientists have been intrigued by sporadic methane spikes detected in the Martian atmosphere. These bursts of methane are particularly puzzling because methane is a short-lived gas. Without a constant source, it should quickly break down in Mars' harsh environment. So, where does it come from? Some theories suggest geological processes, such as serpentinization, a reaction between certain rock types and water, that could be releasing methane. Others have speculated, albeit more controversially, about the possibility of microbial life. The intermittent nature of these methane spikes makes them one of the most tantalizing and debated anomalies on Mars. Ongoing studies using both orbital and surface instruments aim to pinpoint the source of these emissions, but for now, the methane mystery remains one of Mars' most intriguing and potentially groundbreaking mysteries. Stretching over 4,000 kilometers across the Martian surface, Valles Marineris is one of the largest canyons in the solar system, a geological marvel that dwarfs even Earth's Grand Canyon. But beyond its sheer size, this vast chasm holds layered sedimentary deposits that tell a story of a planet in flux. Each layer could represent a different era in Mars' history, from ancient periods when water might have flowed freely to more volatile times marked by volcanic or tectonic upheavals. Some layers reveal irregular patterns that challenge conventional models of sediment deposition, hinting at episodic floods, dramatic climate shifts, or even volcanic ashfalls. These deposits are not only visually striking, they are the keys to unlocking Mars' past environment and assessing its potential for having supported life. As scientists continue to analyze data from orbiters and rovers, this place remains a focal point of research, its mysterious layers urging us to reconsider the dynamic and sometimes unpredictable history of our mysterious red neighbor.
Since 2023, coral reefs around the world have been getting hit hard by unusually warm ocean weather. Scientists are calling it the biggest coral bleaching event ever recorded. About 84% of the world's reefs have been affected by this, from the Great Barrier Reef to the Caribbean. Coral bleaching happens when water gets too warm for too long. So the coral kicks out the algae, which gives it its color and food, so it's basically starving itself. If the water doesn't cool down soon enough, the coral dies. And since coral reefs support about 25% of all marine life, this isn't just bad for the ocean, it's a full-on crisis. What's making it worse is that this isn't just a freak event, it's happening because of long-term ocean warming from climate change. made even more intense by El Nino, a natural climate cycle that temporarily raises ocean temperatures around the world. So between long-term warming and this short-term boost, the reefs are taking a double hit. The heat just keeps building and the reefs can't recover fast enough. Entire ecosystems are at risk. Once they're gone, they don't come back easily, if at all. Hidden asteroids near Venus could be headed our way. It turns out Venus has a bunch of asteroids tagging along in its orbit, at least 20 of them. Scientists only recently found these things because they're usually lost in the glare of the sun, making them nearly impossible to spot from Earth. That's a problem because some of them have weird, unstable orbits that could eventually cross paths with us. One of them, called Zoosve, has already caught scientists' attention. It gets uncomfortably close to Earth from time to time, and if even one of these so-called city killer asteroids ever hits us, it would not be pretty. It'd cause serious damage. I mean, they're called city killers for a reason, right? So it sucks that we can't really track them that well, not only because the sun blocks our view, but because, tools we have can't really keep tabs on stuff in that part of the sky. That's why scientists are pushing for space-based observatories, satellites that could watch these things without being blinded by sunlight. Back in May of 2024, the sun let loose one of the biggest solar storms we've seen in decades. A surge of high-energy particles were fired straight towards the Earth. Normally, our planet's magnetic field handles this kind of thing, trapping most of that radiation inside the Van Allen belts, which are basically these two donut-shaped zones of charged particles wrapped around Earth. They kind of act as a force field, to put it as simply as I can, but this time a tiny NASA satellite called Elfin detected two brand new temporary radiation belts forming around Earth. One of them was filled with high-energy protons and was floating farther out than the usual belts. These new belts could have seriously messed with satellites and space equipment. They're like invisible minefields. A hit of that radiation can fry electronics. The good news is they eventually faded, but the fact that they appeared at all means that solar storms can temporarily reshape the environment around Earth. That's something we're gonna really need to consider for space travel and even people flying at high altitudes during these events. There's this glitch in Earth's magnetic field called the South Atlantic Anomaly. It's basically a weak spot in the planet's protective magnetic shield, and it floats over parts of South America and the South Atlantic Ocean. This thing isn't new, but over the past couple years, it's gotten bigger but weaker, and it started splitting into two separate zones. Scientists at NASA and ESA are keeping a close eye on it, but what's all the fuss about? Well, this magnetic field is what protects Earth from solar and cosmic radiation. When it thins out, more radiation makes it through. Satellites that pass over the anomaly get hit with extra particle bombardment, which has already caused data glitches and in some cases permanent damage. No one's exactly sure why it's happening, but one theory is that it has something to do with the movement of molten iron in Earth's outer core, the same stuff that creates the magnetic field in the first place. Some folks even wonder if it's a sign we're headed for a magnetic pole flip, which has happened before in Earth's history.
So a flock of mysterious glowing UFOs are spotted soaring at high speed near an Air Force base in Indiana this year, and it spooked dozens of onlookers. And we've got the wild video footage to prove it. So if you're looking at it, at least 6 yellowish orange orbs were captured on camera. They were flickering and hovering, and this was near Kokomo, just south of the Grissom Joint Air Reserve Base. And they vanished into the air all of a sudden. Now this was back in October, so not that long ago. Now you can hear one neighbor on the footage saying, "What is that? I think those are UFOs and I really don't feel comfortable going to sleep tonight." Yeah, you and me both. Another stunned witness declares, "What in the actual The zigzagging aircraft appeared as a huge rectangle with a clearly defined vapor shockwave on Doppler weather radar," according to one witness. Somebody else said, "I've seen many easily explained radar anomalies over the years, but never a huge rectangle with a clearly defined wave and trail." So what's going on here, folks? Well, one witness said, judging by the image size, the rectangle would be approximately 20 miles in length. Now, some observers did say the bizarre orbs were likely flares dropped from a military aircraft. Yeah, Alejandro Rojas, an advisor at Enigma Labs, said, "Yeah, they look very clearly military flare things. Now, sure, yeah, that could be an answer, but I don't think it's a definite one. The strange sightings come after a whole wave of UFO reports near military sites. We're talking the Joint Base Langley Eustis in Virginia. That's where officials saw flashing red, green, and white lights in December of last year, and no, they were not Christmas lights. And also, folks, last I checked, the US Air Force has not given any explanation for the hovering lights, and you know they like to discredit things. They either say, no comment, this was that, so if they haven't said it, it's an anomaly. May I offer you some 10-foot tall aliens next? Here's the thing, anything over 7 feet tall is already terrifying to me, personally. Ditto for aliens on their own, no matter what they look like. So when you put those two together, hi, Alexa's nightmares manifested. A video showing two human-like creatures on top of a hill on an island in Brazil gained a lot of traction on social media this year. According to a New York Post report, the beings were, 10 feet tall and spotted at, let's see if I get this right, Ilha do Mel, which is an island more than 3 kilometers off of the coast of southeast Brazil. Now this is a favorite spot for environmentally conscious travelers and beach lovers, and it is celebrated for its varied ecosystems. It's about 5 kilometers in length, 800 meters in width. It's a scenic mosaic of natural marvels. So if we're looking back at the video, you've got figure number 1 and figure number 2 is standing close by, and their appearance on the hilltop sparked a lot of chatter amongst locals. In the video you see, these are creatures that are standing confidently on top of the hill, and apparently according to locals, it's difficult to reach, and the shrubbery on the hill barely reaches their knees. The pair could be seen swinging their arms in an eerily human-like manner, but not enough to convince eyewitnesses that they weren't watching aliens. Somebody in the video literally says, it's too big to be a person. Look at the way he moves, it's really weird. Look at the size of those, like it's very fast. For me, it's enough to see the speed with which this creature goes down the hill. Anyone who has done trails on this hill knows that you don't go down a hill like this in 1 to 2 minutes. That was according to somebody on Instagram, and somebody else said like the way they move reminded them a lot of the Men in Black critters. One person said, and I agree with this, one thing I do know, I'm never stepping foot there. So actually the Brazilian government kind of got in on the fun, for lack of a better word. They didn't confirm whether these were tourists from another country or another planet. They were just like, oh my gosh, surreal what happened on Ilha do Mel. And it's just like, okay, that's an interesting choice. Great summer, it's another story. Even strange beings seem to check it out. They like tweeted this and they're like, oh my god, we're gonna have fun with it. Folks, shouldn't we be concerned if these are aliens visiting? What do you think it was? Let me know.
Jado is a long-forgotten settlement once inhabited by the Tuareg people, sitting near the borders of Libya and Algeria. Jado was once a busy trade hub, a vital stop on the trans-Saharan trade routes, but over time it was abandoned, and today it's just a collection of crumbling mud brick buildings standing in the middle of nowhere. The thing about ghost towns is that they're always a little creepy. You can't help but wonder what happened to the people who lived there. Why did they leave? Well, in Jado's case, trade routes probably changed. The place just wasn't as important anymore, but still, standing in the middle of this empty, ancient settlement, it's impossible not to feel the weight of its history. And you may even wonder, did everyone truly leave? Or are some of their spirits still clinging to the place that they once called home? And if so, do any of them really want you there? Next on the list, we have another monster that used to roam the desert, Macumosaurus rex. In 2014, paleontologists discovered the remains of this giant croc-like creature in the Sahara. Now, when I say giant, I really do mean giant. It weighed over 6,000 pounds and could grow twice the size of modern crocodiles, if not more. The skull alone was over 5 feet long. Just imagine the size of its mouth. This ancient marine reptile lived during the Jurassic to early Cretaceous period and would have been an absolute terror in its day. Interesting little fact here, scientists used to think the Macumosaurus species died out during the Jurassic period, but the fossil was dated back to the Cretaceous. So these giant crocs lasted much longer than anyone had originally thought. When it comes to dinosaurs, one of the most famous has to be the Spinosaurus, mostly thanks to Jurassic Park 3, definitely the coolest thing that movie gave us. In 2014, a Spinosaurus fossil was discovered in Morocco, and it was a big deal because this dino was one of the largest carnivores ever to walk the earth. But the original Spinosaurus remains were found nearly a century ago in Egypt. During World War II, though, they were lost in a bombing raid, and for years scientists could only go off drawings and sketches. But then, in 2014, paleontologists hit the jackpot with these new fossils. Spinosaurus was a massive creature with a sail-like fin on its back. Some scientists even believe it could have spent a lot of time in water, hunting like a giant crocodile. The Eye of Sahara, or Richat structure, is one of the most spectacular sights in the Sahara. The best way to see it, though, is from the sky. It's this massive circular formation that stretches about 30 miles across. It's so massive you can actually see it from space. For years, people thought it was caused by a meteorite hitting the Earth, but after more research, scientists figured out it's probably the result of some ancient geological processes. Basically, layers of rock being pushed up and then worn down over millions of years, creating this crazy looking layered formation that kind of looks like a big giant eye. Of course, though, not everyone agrees on that. Some people still think it's the remains of Atlantis, mostly because the way it's shaped kind of matches what Plato described in his stories about the lost city. Others even wonder if ancient aliens are behind it. The idea is that the structure's symmetry is so perfect it just can't be a natural thing. In 2012, a group of workers in the Sahara stumbled on something pretty crazy: the wreckage of a British fighter plane from World War II. The Kitty Hawk P-40. The plane had been missing for almost 70 years, along with its pilot, Flight Sergeant Dennis Copping. What makes this discovery even more eerie, though, is that Copping didn't die in the crash. It turns out he used his parachute to make a shelter near the wreck, but his remains weren't there. So they figure he ran out of food and water and eventually would have decided to wander off in search of help. But Copping was never seen or heard from again. For years, he was reported missing in action until this wreck was found in 2012. And finally, there's Timgad, an ancient Roman city once hidden under the sands of the Sahara. Timgad was founded around 100 CE by Roman Emperor Trajan and used to be a busy city with theaters, temples, public baths, and everything you'd expect from a big Roman settlement. But after the fall of the Roman Empire, the city was abandoned and pretty much forgotten. It wasn't until the 19th century that archaeologists rediscovered it, and today, Timgad is one of the best preserved Roman cities, with its streets, houses, and monuments still in pretty good shape. It's kind of mind-blowing that a city so grand could just get swallowed by the desert for centuries, only to be brought back to life by archaeologists.